All right, so completing the square. Now, it sounds like something crazy, especially when you see this. You're like, ooh, there's fractions and stuff. No worries here, okay? It's just showing us the process of how things are going to work. So here's how this is going to go. We're going to sort of build our way into the actual building of a square here. So here's how this works. Write each expression as a squared binomial and then add a term to complete the square. Here's how this is going to work every time we do this. We're going to take the number in front of x, our b term. We're going to take that number, we're going to divide it by 2. We also could say we have it. And then whatever answer we get, we're going to square. And that's the number that we would put in our blank, because we're going to be putting blanks in things here too to kind of help our process. So take your b value, divide it by 2, square it, and then that's the number to complete our square. Now here's the part where things can get simple or we can have a backup plan. I need to turn this into what's called the square of a binomial. Now what that means is if I were to go through and factor this like we normally do before, you're like, it looks like a diamond problem. I could do a diamond problem on this. Now the reason I'm doing this off on a post-it is we're not going to need to do it, but I want you to see how it would work. So here I'd go, okay, my multiply number is 9. My add number is 6. Well, there's not a lot of ways I can get 9. 9 and 1 or 3 and 3. Well, the only one that's getting me to 6 is 3 and 3, which would be a positive 3 and a positive 3, because all my signs are positive. Or I can also write this as x plus 3 squared, the square of a binomial. But there's a faster way to do it. If I do my little bit of side work when I'm doing these, whatever your b divided by 2 number is, 6 divided by 2 is 3, it's going to be the number I put in there. And it's going to work that way every single time on these, which is always a really nice thing. So as we're starting to work through, as we look at these and we're trying to work on our perfect square trinomial and then our squared binomial, again, take the number in front of x, my b, divide it by 2. Make sure to use parentheses when you square it, because this value will always come out positive. Okay? That makes my perfect square trinomial. So then to get it into its squared binomial form, again, I got options. If I did my side work, it's just the number in the parentheses. Otherwise, I can just take my b value and divide it by 2, because they are one and the same. And I get my answer. Thank you. Yep. So you're like, that really is all I got to keep doing? It's just take that number in front of x, divide it by 2, and then square it, and stick that number in the blank. Yep, that's all we're doing. All sorts of fun stuff. So, get into this. People later watching this are going to be like, what is he so happy about? Oh, I'm just happy about life. It's either my number in the parentheses or my b value divided by 2. You're like, okay, that part, I can handle that part. So what's that got to do with actually solving something? Actually finding an answer to something? Glad you asked. So when we're trying to solve a quadratic equation, something with x squared, we've had a few ways of doing that. We've done square roots, and we've done factoring that we just got done with. But completing the squared, this lets me solve any quadratic. Like, it works for everything. Like, there is not a quadratic that this method won't use. So if you learn this, you sort of got a backup plan for everything. Now, it looks like there's a lot of steps, but most of the time, at least one of these steps are going to get skipped, if not 2 of them. So we're always going to make sure the number in front of x squared is 1. If it's not, we're going to divide everything by that number. So like if we had a 2 or a 3 in front, we'd divide everything through before we started. Okay? So like, for instance, let's kind of do number 5 here as we're looking at these. Okay, make sure my x squared coefficient is 1. It is. Check. Write an equation in the form x squared plus bx. Okay? Get x's alone. So basically all it's telling us is if my x terms aren't the only terms on this side, whatever else is there needs to go away. So I'm going to minus the 4 out of there. We'll just label it this way for the first time or two through so we know what our steps are. So we've got this x squared plus bx, my x's are alone. But then it also says in parentheses, add blanks to each side. So here's what I mean by that. Once the x's are alone, we're going to add a blank. And once whatever number's here on the right is there, we're going to add a blank. You're like, okay, what are these blanks for? I'm glad, again, you asked. So I'm going to make myself a little area for some side work over here. You remember what we just did up in the top section? How we got that number to stick in the end? Same idea. I'm going to take my b value, my number with x. I'm going to divide it by 2. And I'm going to square it. And whatever number I get, that's the number that goes in both blanks. So by adding the same thing to both sides, I'm not changing the value of the problem at all. I'm just changing the way it looks a little bit so I can actually solve this. So now, we're almost there actually. Like we did up above, to get to my square of a binomial, I got 2 options. I either take my b value here and divide it by 2, or the number I had in parentheses up here that I squared. It'll be one and the same, because 12 divided by 2 is positive 6. Negative 4 plus 36 is 32. And now things should be looking really familiar. Because now, just like we just got done doing, to get to the x, that parentheses and the squared are in my way. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Because squared and square root are opposites. They cancel. Remember, we're going to get 2 answers. So as soon as I do the square root step, I got to do plus minus. And just to make sure, give exact solutions, no decimals. Now, wait a minute here. Oops, let's clear that out. Square root of 32. Well, that would be a decimal, so I can't do that. So now I've got to go, maybe I break out my perfect squares here. Nicely done. I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 32, but one of them is going to be a perfect square. And this was one of the things that when I was doing some of the quiz stuff, going through it, where we had some little issues, like some of you on this one maybe did 4 and 8, which is the right idea. You found a perfect square, but I can find a bigger one. So here, the one that's perfect gets to break down and get out of radical jail. The other one doesn't. So I get that written down. And now I got one job left. I need to get x by itself. So I'm going to minus the 6, and we're going to chat about this again like we have before. That plus minus is a wall. Negative 6, put up the wall. The only way I can go further than this is if there would have been no radical here. Then I can simplify a little further. But if there's a radical, I'm done. Sometimes I'll have this to break down, sometimes I won't. Sometimes it'll break down clean, sometimes it won't. But the process is going to be the same. So for some of you, you're looking like, wow, that's a lot to do for one problem. Let's try to condense a little bit on the second one. Okay, first job, x is alone. So we'll get the 6 out of there. Now sometimes that'll even be set up for you. That'll be nice when that happens occasionally. And I'm going to go ahead and add my blank on this step while I'm at it. So I move the 6 to the other side as a negative. And now I'm going to do my little bit of side work. So once again, whatever number's in front of x, we're going to divide it by 2. Make sure we don't lose our sign. We're going to square it. And that's the number that's going in the blanks on both sides. So once I've got that set, x, what number is going to go in here with my x in the parentheses? -3. Perfect. My b divided by 2, either by looking there or if I did my side work, looking down here. Simplify my right side. And now again, my next job is to get the squared out of there. So I do my square root, and anytime I do square root, it means the other side's going to a plus minus. And this time, my radical doesn't break down. There's not a perfect square bigger than 1 that is a factor of 3. So I just leave it. And then again, remember, plus minus is the wall. You can hang out on the same side, but do not try to put it inside. And I can't write it as plus minus 3 square root of 3, okay? Now I'm letting the 3 in past the wall. Can't do it. And we're set. So it is. It's a little bit of a process, but as you do some more of them, you will get more comfortable with it. You will, you will, you will. All right, I just got a couple more here I want to play with on the backs. There's a couple other little things that can happen. This is going to be a 2-day note sheet. Okay? So we've got this today, and then we're going to finish this one tomorrow, so don't have this go too far. You can even see here, day 2 review. So we are going to be cutting it off here in a minute. So solve by completing the square. Again, exact solutions. Now this time I'm fortunate. This time I already have my x's alone. So I can go straight to my blanks without having to do much thought here. Take my b, divide it by 2, and using the parentheses, square it. Got my perfect square trinomial on the left. Again, just take half of your b, whether you see it here or whether you just take half of that number. They both get me the same thing. And I just keep plugging away here. Got to get rid of the squared. I'm going to use square root. It's opposite. I got to remember my 2 answers, so I got to have my plus minus. And if I have a perfect square, and I do, that's a factor of my value underneath, I'm going to go ahead, break down my perfect square. My other value will stay under the radical. And I'm going to add my 5 over. Again, it hangs out on that side. It ain't getting through the wall, though. This has a radical, this doesn't, and I'm good. Like, okay, maybe. This might not be the worst thing ever. And it isn't. Okay, one more situation we can run into. All right, x is not alone this time. Got to fix that. Once we have our x's alone, we go into blank mode. Do my little bit of scratch work here. Take my b, divide it by 2, and square it. Now, I will have some people tend to start asking at this point, why can't I just immediately go from this to this? Because I know it's just going to be half of that number. Why can't I do this? Decent enough question. If this was the only side I was thinking about, I would say that's okay. But here's the problem. People then tend to forget about adding the 36 to the other side, and this ends up being negative 35, and people are all confused. It's worth the extra couple of seconds to put the step in so we don't mess that up. Because once I get here, the square root of 1, 1's a perfect square. Square root of 1 is 1. And here comes that one situation where I can keep going. And again, some of you even ran into this on the quiz. If there are no radicals there, I can actually get to the two answers now. I can simplify this to 6 plus 1, get my answer, and 6 minus 1, and get my answer. Okay, that's the only time we have to keep going with it. When there's radicals, we leave it alone. But if there's no radical, bless you, we just go ahead and we get that set. So your job is to deal with the day one worksheet. Same type of stuff. And then what we're going to do is, over the 3 days we keep playing with this, we're going to keep adding one piece. So tomorrow we're going to add this vertex form in. We remember that. And then day 3 we're going to add circles in. But the concept, what you're doing here, is going to be the same every day. So if you're looking for consistency, you have found the right thing. And as always, if we have questions, let me know.